Okay, so welcome to our Why Cycle event, which is part of Kirkcaldy Cycling Festival, and thank you all for coming. My name's Craig, and I'm a development worker for Greener Kirkcaldy, and I'm going to be your host for today. We're joined by three committed cyclists who have volunteered to tell us about how cycling fits into their lives, and each is going to focus on a slightly different aspect of cycling. So hopefully everybody who's watching now and later when it goes up online will find an aspect of cycling that appeals to them. So a big thank you to George, Carolyn and Dianna for agreeing to present for us. Just in case you're not that familiar with Zoom, I'm sure you're all experts after the last few months, but you can mute your microphone and turn your video off in the settings on the bottom left-hand side of the video screen. It should just pop up the menu when you scroll your mouse down. And on that menu, you'll also find the chat box function. So that will open up a window on the right-hand side of the screen. So if you want to comment, react, or ask a question as any of the speakers are presenting, if you could just type the question in that chat box and we'll come back and we'll revisit that question whenever we've got a minute and we'll put it to the speakers. So you can also toggle the view as well. So I'm presuming that you're on speaker view at the moment, which means you're just seeing me. If you want to see everybody else in the room, you can toggle your own settings so that you can see everybody just in the top right. There's a gallery button up there. And like I say, yeah, just to remind you that we are recording this and it's going to go out on our social media. So the plan is that we will run through the three presentations, one after the other. And like I said, each focuses on a different type of cycling. And I think all the speakers, two of the speakers are based in Kirkcaldy and one's in Edinburgh. So they're all relatively local. And after we've heard from them, we'll open the floor to questions. And do remember, yeah, put them in the chat box as we go as well. So first person up is going to be George. So George is going to tell us about his career in road cycling. So I'll hand over to George now.
Okay.
So George, if you could share your screen.
Are people able to see that okay?
Mm-hmm.
Fantastic. Okay, what I'm going to talk about is why I cycle and a little bit of history into why I do what it is I do. So as Craig said, my name's George McDermid and I've been cycling pretty much for as long as I've been alive. And I know that because my dad was a very keen cyclist. This is in the 30s. And this is my mum. My mum was a very keen cyclist as well. This is her 19 years old as she cycled to the Cape Wrath Lighthouse and back, totally unassisted, which was quite an amazing feat for a 19-year-old lassie, especially in the 1940s, which is why my mum's one of my all-time cycling heroes. So when my mum and dad met, it was fairly obvious that they were going to create a family of cyclists. And this is why I know I've been cycling ever since I could walk. So people say that some people are born to cycling, some people achieve cycling abilities, and some people have cycling thrust upon them. And I think our family, if you talk to my brothers, and here's my two brothers here with one of them in a sidecar, which you didn't get very many sidecars attached to cyclists in the 1960s. But we had kind of a mixture of all of that. We didn't really have a choice. And when I was very young, my job was to sit on a little child seat at the back of the tandem with my mum and my eldest brother bouncing around in front of me. So finding my wheels, here's me 3 years old. And the important point I want to make here is that if you're going to cycle on the road at all, anywhere, it's really important that you understand how the road works. So even at 3 years old, my parents made sure that I understood exactly the highway code. I knew the highway code inside out long before I had to learn it for when I became a driver. And it's one of the things a lot of people don't think about when they're young cyclists, that the highway code is an important book. It's for cyclists as well as other road users. There's also lots and lots of really interesting books about cycling, because there are things you don't think about if you don't know other people who cycle, what clothes to wear, what bags to have, what food to take. and so on. So it's worth having a look around. And if you don't have anyone to teach you how to look after bikes, it's always worth finding a course or finding a books on road maintenance. If you're out on the road for any length of time, invariably something will go wrong, and it's useful to be able to fix your bike. So when I started cycling, I was obviously going to be the first Scotsman to win the Tour de France, and I started racing like a lot of young people did. I was, after all, a real cool dude. However, head in hands, even though I was given the best advice you could possibly get, i.e. pedal faster, I was never ever going to be a racing cyclist. And why would I want to be? Scotland has some of the best countryside that a cyclist could ask for. The roads are quiet, long, beautiful. Why would I want to cycle along them fast when I could take my time and savour the views that we have? I like nothing more than to pull over side, look at the views, take them in, explore the countryside, find a quiet loch, just sit back and enjoy the peace and countryside. And when you're road cycling, because you can cover quite a bit of a distance, you can find yourselves in some really nice parts of the country. So when I put my mudguards back on my bike and bought myself a nice little tent and decided that I was going to explore the countryside. I did, of course, develop cyclist suntan. And if you don't know a cyclist suntan, you have pure white feet and a pure white torso with brown arms and brown legs. And I did, of course, enjoy large pants. If you're going to cycle on the road for any length of time, large pants is an absolute comfort necessity. A lot of people, and I was quite amazed when I was younger, thought of cycling as being a solitary, introverted affair. And I knew that that was not me. I don't cycle because I'm an introvert. And just to prove it, when I was younger, I always liked cycling in groups. So nothing's better than being in a large group of fellow-minded people rather than plodding on your own. One of the things I love about Greener Kirkcaldy, the social bike rides, really give you time to meet other bikes, to spend some time chatting and learning about what they're doing. And of course, stopping on longer rides and having a bit of a bite to eat. This is taken from when I used to ride with the Cyclist Touring Club in Edinburgh. We used to stop, build a fire, genuinely build a fire, get our billy cans out, brew up a cup of tea, and sit around blethering for an hour or so before heading off back into the wild. There I am again. Don't even know how old I was back then. So food is one of the important things when you're cycling out on longer distance roads. Of course, I don't sit and build fires anymore, and I try to eat slightly more comfortably, even if it's getting the china out of a little local hostelry. But you must be aware, especially in Scotland, when you're cycling in remoter parts, that these things can happen. You can be in the middle of nowhere, 20 miles from anywhere, relying on a little cafe and finding out that not only are you enjoying the long weekend cycling, that the only cafe for miles around are also enjoying the long weekend. So I was quite hungry that weekend. So what do I enjoy? Well, I've always enjoyed longer distance cycling, taking my stuff on my bags, or bags on my bikes. That was always nice to come home. Cycling with larger groups of people, in cycling rallies. This is taken from the Kirkpatrick Macmillan cycle rally held every couple of years down in Dumfries and Galloway. I'm one of the organisers for that. It's great to meet other people, find other parts of the countryside with local cyclists who know it well. It's also nice to cycle with small groups of friends. This is in the West Coast, just admiring the view. And of course, more intimate cycling with just me and my wife going off our weekends camping. So road cycling in Scotland is not always just roads. Sometimes you need to take a ferry to get there. Some ferries are not exactly designed for taking bikes, and they're quite awkward to get your bikes on and off. Other ferries, plenty room. Other ones, absolutely jam-packed. It wasn't until I took this picture that I noticed that my wife's hanging around in the background there. Some ferries have got nothing much to do. You just sit around waiting until you get to the other side. Other ones, of course, provide somewhere where you can have a little bit of relaxation before having to carry on your way. Other of our islands don't necessarily need ferries to get to. This is crossing to Lindisfarne, where you can cross at low tide. Once you're across there, the tide comes in, you're stranded on the island, but you can cycle around, wait for the tide to come back out and back again. And it's really nice to explore these places by bike. A lot of people complain about hills. This is actually taken at the top of one of Britain's steepest hills in Wales, and pedal cyclists strongly advise to walk. They're talking about walking down the hill, not up the hill, because it is so steep. But there's no shame in walking uphill if you have to. Sometimes your bike's that heavy. It's hard work anyway, but there's no shame in walking if you have to walk. Or you can be as stubborn as me and just point blank refuse. But once you get to the top, the views are always worth it. With hills, it varies. I spent a month in the Netherlands cycling, and whatever gear you started in the morning was the same gear you finished in the day. It never ever varied. And although it was nice to cycle there, I really do miss the variation of going up and down, and the views that you get from hills. Of course, sometimes you have to walk, not because of the steepness of the hill, just because of the terrain itself. But cycling in the winter has its own challenges, but it has its own beauty as well, where everything starts to change. The countryside is just absolutely gorgeous. And again, one of the reasons why I cycle is because going out and seeing this and experiencing it firsthand is absolutely gorgeous. So people ask me, what bike do I ride? Now, cycling on the road, you're not restricted. You don't have to be technical. You don't really have to know an awful lot. People ride all kinds of things. I ride whatever is comfortable. I know a chap who rides one of these. He swears by it. He's really annoyingly, he won't ever give me a shot of it, which is quite annoying, but because I'd love to have a go. But that's what he likes to ride, and there's nothing to stop him from doing so. People ride tricycles. There's a chap in the Edinburgh Club when I was growing up swore by tricycles, and I know people today who still cycle them. Others, fold-up bikes are not meant for long commutes or long rides, but I know a chap who regularly rides 70 miles on his fold-up, and that's what he likes. Tandems, my wife will never go near one with me on it, but I have ridden tandems, and they're a good choice for couples and for parents and children as well as when I was growing up. People even ride mountain bikes on the road, and there's nothing to stop them from doing that. I'm also a pilot for Cycling Without Age. One of the beauty of a lot of road cycling is you can just do shorter journeys even. It doesn't have to be long mental journeys. Cycling Without Age, we regularly do maybe just 2 or 3 miles, but it's nice to take people out and get them to experience the countryside or even the local town or village. So that's maybe a whistle stop tour. Really, I love cycling. I do all kinds of cycling. I do a little bit off-road as well, but road cycling is really my thing. I've cycled lots of places. You can find so many roads in Scotland in particular that are really still quiet and still worth a good ride. It's nice to have tarmac underneath you where you can actually freewheel and climb up hills easily. But I would recommend, if you are going to cycle on the roads, that you really do understand the highway code and how it affects you as a cyclist. Maps, learn where you're going, learn how to read a map. find a bike that's comfortable, wear your lucky jersey if your lucky jersey still fits. Mine don't, but I'm not throwing them out. As Denise said earlier, I am a hoarder. They're not going anywhere. So that's me. Happy cycling.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, George. Loved all the photos. You haven't changed a bit.
Okay.
Put you on the spot. What would you say was your favourite long distance route in Scotland?
I really like the north coast, which is like up sort of John O'Groats right up through Thurso and right along to Cape Wrath. It's really quite incredible, and it's remote, and it feels wild. It's quite nice up there. And I know I haven't been up since. I mean, they've now created the North Coast 500, which is now making it quite popular, and that's in many ways a drawback, because the more popular it becomes, the busier it becomes. And the North Coast 500 is not just popular with cyclists; it's popular with motorists. So you end up with more cars. Well, when I did a lot of my cycling up there, it was before all that became popular. Not as bad as when my mother did it. When she did it in the 40s, she said it wasn't even tarmacked. It was not tarmac at all. How she did it on an old big up set up big push bike with steel wheels and rod brakes. I have no idea, but no, but it is. It's really nice up that way.
Fantastic. Okay, thank you. So we'll see if people have got questions for you after the rest of the presentations. Okay, but thanks very much. That was great.
Okay.
We're going to move on, and we're going to move on to Carolyn, who's going to talk about commuting. So if you could maybe share your screen, Carolyn, pop your slideshow up. Perfect. We can see that perfectly. Thank you very much. You are muted, though. I'll see if I can unmute you. There we go.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
So Susan, who asked me to come and talk about cycling to work, she briefed me that just to talk about one commute that I do at the moment. But basically, I've never owned a car. I've only ever owned a bicycle. And so I've always cycled to work, whether I've been working in London or working in Edinburgh. I don't think I cycled to work when I was working in the jungle, when I was working abroad, but I'll just tell you a wee bit about the one that I do at the moment, and then, so I'm Carolyn and I live in Kirkcaldy, and I work at Bankhead in Glenrothes. So it's a pretty easy cycle, really. There's the picture of it. There's cycle paths quite a lot of the way, and in fact, Fife Council's got quite a lot of cycle paths throughout Fife. So it is quite easy to get places around Fife if you're cycling locally. And that one is about 6.3 miles and takes about an hour. Well, for me it does. Anyway, probably George should probably do it much faster than that. But I live in Kirkcaldy, I live at the bottom of the hill. And so basically on the way to work, it's all the way up the hill. And it's great coming back down. But I cheat sometimes because I take my bicycle. I bought that bike when I was in Edinburgh and I was cycling around Edinburgh. I lived in New Haven and I had to cycle up the hill again to get into work in town. So I bought that bike about 5 years ago. And I went for the lightest one I could find, so that it was, so I didn't have to carry myself and my computer and a very heavy bike. I could just pedal on a light one, and I've got panniers on the back where I can put computers or files or books and stuff. So the commute that I do at the moment, if I don't cycle all the way, I take my bike up to the train station, jump on the train, get to Glenrothes with Thornton, and then cycle from that. And that means I can get to work in about 30 minutes. I have the option of maybe going by public transport, you know, by bus. But if I do the same journey, it takes longer, and it's double the price. So for me, going by bus to Bankhead is £7 a day, whereas I get on the train, I can get there really quickly, and it's £3.40 return. So, you know, it's a no-brainer for me. If I'm not cycling all the way, then I'll just do a cycle and do a train. What do I wear? I cycle throughout the year, so I'm not sort of fair weather cyclist. That's essential, is to be dry, basically. And then if I'm dry, I can go anywhere at any time. Gloves are really important because your hands get freezing, especially in the winter, and wet. And waterproof trousers are fantastic, and waterproof boots with warm waterproof boots, basically. And that basically meant that when I was working in Edinburgh, and when I was living in Edinburgh and working in Fife, I had to cycle from, I cycled along the cycle path up to Craigleith, jumped on the bus, left my bike in Edinburgh, and then got off at Bankhead, and then did the cycle path back again. And I did that all through the winter. And one of the nice things about cycling throughout the seasons, I found, one, I didn't need any gym because I get my exercise, and you get your exercise outside, so you're breathing fresh air rather than the air that's inside a gym, and you can kind of push yourself up hills and test yourself a bit like if you were on a treadmill, and then you can take a little a rest when you need it. I was always late leaving the house, and I had to get the bus, so I was always racing up the hill, and then having a nice cycle back down. But one of the things I really loved about cycling throughout the seasons is that you watch, especially along cycle paths, you watch nature come to life. You watch the different flowers coming in, like the bluebells coming in May, and all the hedgerows coming in the summer. And it smells different in the summer. You smell the warmth, air, and I loved that. Before I got to work, you know, I would be cycling in the summer or cycling in the winter. And in the winter, it's all dark and you feel enclosed, and you feel, I quite missed it when it became light, because, you know, you're traveling and you feel quite like you've still got the duvet on, really. It's all like dark, and you're cycling through, and you hope you're going to get, that bus is going to come on time, and then you get onto the brightness. But it's like a kind of safety net, almost, that darkness going through a cycle path that you know every single turn and twist, and you know where the potholes are because you do it every single day. And then you start seeing people as well that you really like, you know, and say hello to because you see them. And you see pedestrians each day going along the cycle path as well. And you create little stories about what their lives are like. You know, I was entertaining myself as I was cycling along, going, oh, wonder what they do. Wonder where they live. What family life have they got? And in the summer, when you're cycling back down the hill, back down to New Haven, there'll be loads of people wandering around, and the smell of spliff in the air was huge. Everybody's out, you know, taking the air and having fun in the summer. Yeah, so that whole cycling and commuting to work, it doesn't, as long as you're having your essential clothing to keep you dry, actually you don't need that much because you get quite warm when you're cycling. I don't know, George, whether you found that. You actually don't, as long as you're dry and your hands are warm and your feet are warm. And I found that having a hood with a beak helped you, you know, stop when the rain is really pouring down. It kind of shades your eyes. As long as your eyes are shaded, then it doesn't really matter how much rain is happening, you know. It's quite refreshing. It was just when it was snowy and slushy, then you're kind of sliding around a bit. But that was, you know, as long as you're dry, you're fine. And as long as you've got a working bike, that's fine. So I would say if anybody's commuting, get your bike serviced, because there's nothing worse than your bike having a puncture when it's freezing, snowing, raining, and you're trying to sort it out in the wet. So I would always go, and I'm so delighted that Kirkcaldy have now got, you know, the bike maintenance. I took my bike along the other day, and that was great, because the cycle that I do up to Glenrothes, there is a cycling place up in Glenrothes, and it was handy for dropping my bike off before I went into work. But it's even more handy now because it's local. And if anybody wants to find out if they can, what their route is to cycle to work, in Fife, for instance, if you're in Fife, then this is a really good website. You can see all your cycle paths, and you can get the distance for them. And this is an updated one, you know, for COVID, so keep the distance. And yeah, so mine's very short and sweet. But if anybody's got any questions about commuting to work, I don't find that I need a shower or anything like that either at work. So, but it's great if you have showers. It's only the thing that I need is if you get wet, then you just need a place to get dry, to dry off. And there's most work people, you know, people at work have bikes, and if they don't have bike stands or places where you can secure your bike, then you can suggest that they do that and contact either the council or Transport for Scotland, and they can get funding, or places like Kirkcaldy, and you know, you can get funding for putting bike racks in and encouraging people to cycle to work. So yeah, that's me.
Okay, thank you very much, Carolyn. That was really interesting. I wondered, because obviously you've not been travelling into work this last wee while, so have you missed your commute? How's it?
Oh yeah, really, because it's exercise you don't even think about. You know, you just get up and especially going up a hill, you know, it gives you, I mean, we've been on some bike rides. Myself and my son have been sort of going around. We did that one going up to Kinghorn Loch and then coming back along the coastal path, and sort of going off and doing bike rides. But and we've done quite a lot of walking, but it's not quite the same. It's like every day you get on your bike and you go somewhere and you get that exercise without even thinking, and you get to be outside and you get to breathe fresh air. I'm not like, unlike George, I don't do road cycling very often because there's a lot of drivers that don't like bikes and they don't take care of you. So I love having a cycle path because it means that I don't have to avoid potholes, because a lot of the times when you're on the road, I don't know how you feel about this, George, but when you're cycling to work, there's lots of potholes, and if you're careering, you know, you're trying to avoid a pothole because your bike's gonna get stuck. A lot of cars don't like that because it doesn't give them an awful lot of time for you to sort of like stick your hand out and tell them that you're going to actually move out into the road. A really good advice that somebody gave me is that don't feel like you have to be polite. Take up your space in the road. If you're cycling to work or on the road, or if you're in Edinburgh, don't try and be polite and keep in the side and keep going in and out when you're in. You are allowed to take up that space in the road, take up that space in the road, and if somebody starts beeping at you, you can turn around and tell them, I have as much right to be here as you. And as long as you're giving, as George says, you know your highway code, know how to do your signals if you're turning left or right, and so you give drivers plenty of warning, then they shouldn't be taking umbrage with you. We used to work for Standard Life, and I'd cycle up and down Lothian Road, and that was one of the worst Lothian Road, because you have these cars that are desperate to get round and they're not going to give you the space or the time to move in and out. And you have to be really strong, and you have to be, no, this is my space, and I'm going, and I'm going to put my hand out and I'm going to go. But that's not for the timid. So if you're not used to that and taking on the drivers and taking up your space, then keep to the cycle path, I would say. George, what do you think?
No, I agree. I mean, cycling on roads is a confidence thing, without a doubt. But you're absolutely right about positioning. It's one of the worst mistakes a lot of people make, is they try to cycle very, very close to the curb, which almost encourages people to overtake you.
Yes.
Because they think, oh, there's plenty of room, I'll try and overtake them, and they're too close. And the 2 metre rule of safe passing is now quite a large campaign, and there are on-the-spot fines, and drivers can lose 3 points on their licence if they're caught passing a cyclist too closely. And so again, what you should be doing is you should be cycling. You're allowed to cycle anywhere up to the white line. That's why the white line's there. That's your side of the road. And if you happen to be cycling in the middle of your side of the carriageway, that's absolutely acceptable. It's just very, very annoying to people behind you. I was in Uist last year, and I took my bike over, and of course there's only single lane roads, there's nothing else. There's a huge amount of traffic, and apparently everybody hates cyclists because you can't get past them. But there are passing places, and if you just pull over into a passing place to allow cars to pass, then they treat you with a lot of respect. The problem is that people don't know the rules, and so they try to just sit in a single lane road. They go past the passing places, and then there's a queue of cars, lorries, buses behind them, and it gives cyclists a bad name. It's a pain having to stop at almost every passing place, or slow down at every passing place just to allow cars to pass. But it means that you have a better relationship with them. And it's just understanding what your rights are. Towns are quite busy, difficult, because a lot of drivers are always in a rush to get around, to get by. But when you're out in the country, it's whenever I work with a group, if we're cycling 2 abreast, whenever there's a car, we have a standard calls. Car up means the car's coming behind, or car front means the car's in front. So what we do is we go to single file whenever we see cars coming, so that people communicate with one another. If there are potholes, people shout out and point out where the potholes are if you're in a group, so that people in the group can avoid the potholes. And sometimes it means that you are taking up quite a bit of the road, but you've got just as much right.
In Europe,
you shouldn't be intimidated by cars. You've got as much right to be on that road as they do.
But I think because I commuted a lot in London when all the bombings were happening in London. You couldn't get on the bus, you couldn't get on a taxi, you couldn't get, so the safest place to be was on your bike. And so I did a lot of commuting in London, but drivers weren't used to bikes in London, and they didn't like them. And so I worked for a Greater London Authority at the time, and it was paramount that we needed to put in bike lanes, to keep cyclists safe. And I think, doing wide open spaces on the road is very different from commuting within busy urban areas and towns and stuff. And I think it's really important for cyclists to have the option of having bike lanes, where, like in Europe, like in Germany, I was in Berlin, and it's fantastic. I just love the way they've got it. They've got more cyclists than they have cars, and you share the space equally between cars and bikes and pedestrians, and you are with the pedestrians in your own kind of shaded area. And as a tourist, I was like, oh, I was getting beat at by the bikes, because you have to get out of the way, but you're not in the way of the cars. You're not competing and putting yourself in that space.
I mentioned during my presentation I spent a month in the Netherlands cycling, and it's a completely different experience. You can cycle right through Amsterdam and not even see a car.
Yes.
The lanes are so separate, because but then it's numbers. There are so many people, and there's that circular argument of, well, you need the numbers to build the infrastructure, but you need the infrastructure to get the numbers. So it's one of the things that everyone's always campaigning about. But during lockdown, I mean, it has happened. There's a lot of pop-up cycle lanes appearing in various cities now to keep the cyclists separate.
Yeah.
And I think what was happening, and one of the things I noticed a lot when lockdown first happened, is the roads were lovely and quiet for cycling on.
Yes.
But when you went onto the cycle lanes, shared use ones with pedestrians, there was a similar conflict between pedestrians and cyclists, because there was more cyclists now using shared use paths with pedestrians and didn't know how to behave themselves when they were screaming at 20 miles an hour through a park, which has got young children and families who are dog walkers, and dogs have been told that they had to be kept on a lead, and then cyclists shouting at them because the lead's across the path, because it's just education. And I just think
that's a really interesting point, because when I was cycling, commuting in Edinburgh, especially at night, the dogs, when they're walking, you can't see the dogs in the dark. And the only way you can see the dogs is if they have the little lights, around their neck on their collars. And I think that's a bit like learning your highway code. It's, if you're going to be on a cycle path, people need to know that they need to have lights in the winter time, just the same as the cyclists do. Because otherwise you're coming down at a speed and you think it's empty, and all of a sudden this dog.
It was one of the things. I mean, I've gone for years and years and years without ever having a bell on my bike, and then I've realised the more cycle paths I use, the more useful a bell has become. Yeah. And what I've discovered from using the bell is that suddenly I'm an acceptable cyclist, that people will stop and they'll thank me for ringing the bell. Whereas before, I would maybe have to shout out to them or whiz past without saying it. Even, well, to say whiz past, even going by at 5 miles an hour, can still scare the bejesus out of a 90-year-old woman on her trolley walking with her wee Zimmer frame. So you've just got to respect other road users. Yeah. And I think the upcoming changes that have been suggested for the highway code highlight that, with a hierarchy of road users, starting with big lorries at the bottom and building a pyramid of smaller and smaller vehicles until you get to bikes and pedestrians at the very top of pyramid. Everyone just needs to respect the other users, and if you can do that, it's amazing. I mean, I was getting lorry drivers tooting and waving and smiling at me in Uist, whereas I had been told by my friends over there, so don't cycle in Uist. Nobody likes cyclists over here, and I had a great time, and I had absolutely no problem with the traffic as long as you treat them with respect.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Caroline. I think we can pick up the discussion later, but I think we'd better let Dianna on and tell us about her stuff. That's okay, it's all very interesting, and I think the two kind of topics kind of mesh together quite nicely there. But now we're going to go to Dianna, who's going to tell us about cycling on the school run. So I'll hand over to you, Dianna.
With me, this was working earlier.
We've got us. Yep, it's come in.
Oh, go. Come on. Hey.
Oh.
First. Brilliant. Thank you very much. My name's Dianna Farrell. I'm in Edinburgh. I've been cycling for as long as I can remember. Since I was a child, I've cycled. Now cycling has taken over my life. I'm a ride leader. I'm a Breeze champion leading free rides for women. I tutor for British Cycling. I work a bit for Scottish Cycling. I have a cycle coaching business. And I have kids, so I cycle the school run. So this was a picture that my son did, I think, when he was about 3. He was still writing his name backwards. His name's actually Danny, so I think it's backward and forward in that one. And I think that's 2 of us on a bike, and the other 2 appear to have wheels instead of legs. So cycling has been part of my kids' life since they were born, to the point where they have wheels and not legs. I'm trying to move it on the wrong screen. So why cycle the school run? The obvious answer is it's exercise, similar to what Carolyn was saying. It's exercise that's built into your daily life. It's time you would have spent getting the kids to school anyway. You don't need gym fees. You're getting that exercise doing it. But it's a lot more than that. I find the biggest benefit of cycling to school for me is it's reliable. I go out my door and to school, and it takes 15 minutes. And it always takes 15 minutes, maybe give or take a minute. If I drive the car and it's 2 miles, we have quite a big catchment to school, it takes somewhere between 5 minutes and an hour and a half when you factor in finding somewhere to park, walking to the school. And I live on, if anyone knows St John's Road, Glasgow Road, that goes from the airport in towards town, that can be quite slow at that time of day. So you never know quite how long it's going to take you to get to school. That was a big factor for me. I mainly started cycling the kids in when Danny started, my eldest started at playgroup, because I'm a bit of a big wuss when it comes to driving and parking, and it's so congested around where we are. Finding a parking space just totally stresses me out. I'm not great at reverse parking. It stresses me out completely. This way, I wheel the bikes in the playground. It's totally stress-free. School run is a great place to start cycling because it's generally such short distances. We have quite a big catchment at our primary school, so we go 2 miles, and that's not the most direct route. For most people, it's 1 mile, 2 miles at the most. So it's a brilliant way to start building in that active travel into your life because it's so short. As far as kids go, if you can get them now cycling as part of their daily life, thinking about short journeys as using a bike, using their feet, not getting in a car, that's going to set your kids up with lifelong habits that are going to be good for them and good for the environment and positive for everyone. The more people as well that can cycle the school run, the less cars we have around school, and that's making it safer for absolutely everyone around. So I am a huge fan of cycling the school run. So in terms of how to cycle the school run, for quite a lot of parents, it's not just school-age children. Quite a lot of parents have younger ones as well. So starting right down at the bottom, you can start off with a bike seat for the kids on the back there. That is my eldest, who's now 8, on his way to nursery. He used to sit on the bike and shout, "Faster, Daddy, faster." So I need to try and push to make it go faster as well. I don't know why it keeps going on. There's also trailers. Trailers are a brilliant option if you've got little ones that can't ride their own bike, or if you want to stay in control of what's happening on the roads, or if you've got more than one child. So that's a trailer a friend of mine has, and she can fit her 5-year-old and her 2-year-old into that. They're a little bit cozy, but it's not very far they can put up with it for that, and it's dry as well, which is great. As they're getting a bit bigger, you've got options, balance bikes and scooters. This is how we used to get about when mine were really little. Don't underestimate just how fast a small child can go on a bike without pedals. They're incredibly fast when they get themselves going. I'm also quite a big fan of these things. Can get quite expensive kids bikes. They can be like your child can't pedal yet, get the normal bike and take pedals off, and there you go, hey presto, balance bike. So you can save yourself the expense of that step. The trikes are good as well. You can push them along and they feel like they're cycling, although my daughter used to drag her toes on the floor. And I put this one in just the reality of little teeny ones and balance bikes tends to be a lot of stooped over as you're pushing them or carrying the bike. This was us cycling across the Forth Road Bridge, or Ellen walking and Daddy carrying the bike. So factor that into the time it's going to take you to do your run to school. This is my normal mode of transport and getting to school. So we are very fortunate in getting hold of a cargo bike. I had never heard of cargo bikes until I had kids and was wondering how I was going to get them about once they were getting bigger. And we were very fortunate. The one that looks a little bit like a bucket on wheels, the red one, which is an incredible bike. It'll be going for years and years and years. I don't know why it keeps moving on. So a friend was selling that one, so we bought that one secondhand, which was amazing. At the time, the little one was quite little. So we put a lie-back seat on it. I used to put it in and take Ellen for a cycle round for an hour to get her nap. And I was every single day while looking after my kids. It was brilliant. And I found loads of great cycle paths because I would just pick a route and ride down it. It was a really, really good way of finding your local area. Then they got bigger and bigger. They're both now at school and they got incredibly heavy. And I live halfway up a hill. So we got the new one, the Babbo that you see with the blue cover, which is an electric cargo bike, which is also fantastic. It gives you that bit of a boost to keep being able to do the distances that we do, being able to do the rides up the hill and everything else. Still got the rain cover, they're still nice and dry. That's absolutely perfect for getting to the school run. They come up occasionally secondhand, not so often. So we're now kind of moving on. The kids are getting a bit bigger. And we're looking at other ways to get them to school because they are starting to bicker quite a lot in the cargo bike when they're squished together. Tag-alongs are a really good option. The picture you see on the left, tag-along, it's like converting your bike into a tandem in that it bolts onto the seat post and it gives them a bike behind it. They're really good in that you're still in control of dealing with junctions. There's none of the riding up to a junction yelling, stop, please stop, because you hit the brakes for them. And they feel like they're riding a bike. The downside I found with it is my daughter that you see on there is a bit of a liability, and she likes to look around a lot, so she'd do a lot of leaning off one side like that. And as it did that, you had to account for it because the bike would wiggle a bit. Then again, really fortunate with second-hand tandem came up. And I absolutely love the tandem because, again, the little one who's 6 can go on the back, and I stay in control of the junctions with her. When we first got it, she couldn't reach the pedals, so we looked up all these things like kiddie cranks that you can adapt the cranks so that they can reach, but they're all quite dear. And then we realized that actually taping 2 blocks of wood onto the pedals did the exact same job, and that worked brilliantly. So there's generally a cheaper way to do things. So the tandem's brilliant too for getting to school. Ideally, once you're getting into school age kids, you get them onto their own bikes and riding their own bikes with you. So what we do at the moment, we use the cargo bike on wet days because they stay dry and their bags stay dry, and on drier days we use the tandem, and my oldest one rides his bike and the little one comes on the tandem. A bit of a note on kids' bikes. There are hundreds and hundreds of kids' bikes out there on the market, and you get some really beautiful ones that kids love with like fancy streamers and all kinds of flowery things and police bikes. If you're looking to buy a kid's bike, pick it up and feel the weight of it. There are some phenomenally heavy kids' bikes out there, and they are really tough going. I've had parents when my kids were at nursery, because they know that I cycle, saying, could you have a look at my child's bike? I don't know why, they just don't seem to be able to go anywhere. It weighs a ton, the poor little mite's trying to push on these pedals and going absolutely nowhere. The lighter bikes do tend to be more expensive. I am a huge fan of second-hand bikes. Second-hand bikes are brilliant, especially kid bikes, because you can spend a fortune on a brand new bike, and the first thing they'll do is jump off it and just chuck it on the ground and scratch all the paintwork anyway. So you might as well buy one with the paint already scratched. What we do now is we buy second-hand bikes. They ride them for as long as they fit them, which isn't long with kids, they grow so fast, and then we put them generally back on Gumtree for pretty much what we paid for them. So it's more like a bike loan. So you're not forking out a ton of money all the time and losing money on them. If you're riding with kids on their own bikes, what I would always recommend is get the child to cycle alongside you so that you're closer to the traffic and they're next to you, and you're always that kind of physical barrier between them and the traffic. Personally, I find it gives you more control. It means you can talk directly to them. And exactly what George and Carolyn were talking about, it's about owning that space and saying, I have the right to be here. So you can use the roads responsibly, you can share the roads responsibly, but you can ride with the child alongside you, and that is the safest way to do it, in my view. So that's all the reasons how and why to cycle a school run. These are some of the reasons I hear why not to cycle the school run. The biggest one being the weather. It's awful wet in Scotland. Similar to Carolyn, I ride all year out. I've been riding the school run. I have had days this week where I've had to tumble dry my waterproofs in between pick up and drop off because it's been that wet, and putting wet waterproofs on is no fun. Kids won't bother about riding in the rain. So if you see the picture on the left, that's my son. I think that's actually at the park in Dunfermline. Give a child a puddle and they will go in it. Almost every child I've ever met will go in it. They love riding through puddles. Actually, if you let yourself as an adult ride through the middle of the puddle going, whee, it's actually really good fun. Exactly what Carolyn was saying, good waterproofs for yourself and for your kids. For me, it's the one bit of clothing that's worth spending a lot of money on, is get good waterproofs. Also with kids, because they will go through the middle of all the puddles, make sure that their bike has mud guards at least on the back, because they will get to school otherwise with half the puddles at the back of them. It's not the best look for starting the school day. Waterproof's an absolute must. The one in the middle is the cold. It's too cold to ride my bike. I hear quite a lot. I like doing my ninja cyclist with a buff up to my nose. And it's amazing how much breathing will keep your face warm. Same as Carolyn said, gloves. Gloves are really essential. You don't realise until you cycle over how much your hands take the brunt of the cold. So gloves are a big thing. The biggest obstacle, I think, in terms of weather is ice and snow. If you're using a lot of the cycle paths, a lot of them don't get cleared. Certainly in Edinburgh, they don't get cleared, they don't get gritted. And cycling on ice is no fun whatsoever. So that's to some extent, that's my limitation of, if it's snowy and icy, then I would take the car. And then I discovered ice tyres. Ice tyres are an incredible thing. They're quite dear. I think mine were £60 each. So obviously two, one for front and back. But they're tyres with little teeny spikes on, and they are amazing. They stick to ice like glue. If you're going to ride all year round, it's really well worth investing in some ice tyres. That keeps us going the whole year round now. I hear from other mums in the playground that have been skidding about the roads, had a terrible time driving in the exact same journey that still took us 15 minutes, same as any other day. Other reason I hear not to cycle is, what if I get a puncture? How do I fix my bike? So for a lot of people starting up, this is quite an intimidating thing. What if my chain comes off? What if I get a puncture? And sooner or later, it probably will happen. You'll get a puncture, particularly if you're riding on cycle paths. If you're riding the school run, the biggest advantage there is it tends to be quite a short distance. You don't need to be able to fix punctures. It helps if you can fix punctures, but if you can't, I am a big fan of take a lock, take some money, lock the bike, get a bus home, get a taxi home, get whatever it is home, pick up the bike later, get someone else to fix it, take it to the bike shop, whatever you need. Don't let punctures be that big a problem for you. If you can learn how to do it, great. If you don't want to learn to do it, don't, just as long as you've thought through how you're going to deal with that. My daughter there likes to pump up my tyres beyond all belief and let them out again as well. The biggest reason to me for not cycling the school run, and the one that I've got a lot more sympathy with, is the traffic. This is just outside our school gates in the mornings. We're Storfen in Edinburgh, and it is really busy outside the school gates, and it, especially on wet days like the last couple of days when the parents want to get as close as they possibly can. Exactly what the others have been saying, it's about owning that space, about thinking about your route as well. When you're planning what route to use, if you've got cycle paths, that's brilliant. Bear in mind that on a bike, an extra mile doesn't take that much longer. It's actually not that great an addition to your journey. So the most direct route isn't necessarily the best route to take. The route we use to school takes 15 minutes. It's about 2 miles. The most direct route takes about 8 minutes and is horribly, horribly stressful because it's really busy roads. So really that extra 7 minutes is kind of neither here nor there when it comes to enjoying your route, relaxing what you're doing and making it enjoyable. So think carefully about your route. Like I said, I would recommend always having your child alongside you so that you'll be in that kind of physical barrier, and it also gives you that bit where you can say, right, stop here. Training your child quite early as well as to when to stop. They take that bit longer processing when you say, right, stop here. With my 8-year-old, that will quite often take him another 30 seconds after that, stop here. So it's thinking it through to say exactly when you want them to stop and giving them that delay time to make sure that you are stopping at the right point. Generally, the traffic is never as bad as you think. Once you get out and do it, it's actually all right, as long as you've got that confidence and you don't try and squash into the curb. Like George was saying, that's about the most dangerous thing you can do, is riding right into the curb. Because if cars think they can come past you, they will come past you. If you're further out and they know they've got to cross that white line, so they know it's got to be clear the other way, they'll wait more. So take that time. What I've always said to, when I take novice cyclists out, if you start getting that panic in your head that I'm holding people up, they're going to be cross with me, start counting seconds in your head. And if you get past 20 seconds that you've held that person up, I would be amazed. There is nobody out there driving a car that can't wait 20 seconds to keep everybody safe. So don't get that fear that I've got to get out of the way immediately, and own that space. So things to consider about when you're going to cycle to school. Think about where you're going to lock your bike. So a lot of schools do have bike racks, some are better than others. Think as well about how you're going to lock the bike and if you're going to lock the bike. Some people don't bother locking them. You're fairly safe in school. My recommendation would be, if you're going to lock your child's bike, to leave it. Either use one of the combination ones where you put a number into it, or make sure you've got 2 keys, because your child will lose that key once they've locked their bike. They just will. No matter what you said to them about keeping it safe, they won't remember where it is. So either keep a key yourself as well, or use a number combination on it. I leave the helmet as well. We're lucky we've got an undercover bike rack, so I just lock the helmet onto the bike and we leave that there. If your bike racks are outside, there's nothing worse than putting a soggy helmet that's been in the rain all day on your head. So try and find somewhere, put a bag, stick it on the handlebar or something to leave it. Panniers, exactly as Carolyn said, panniers are absolutely brilliant. Ideally ones that are waterproof. These have got a cover that pull out to go over the top to keep them waterproof. somehow all the stuff you take to school, you think it's just a child's bag, but it's not. There's a bag. Mine need toys. They must have snacks at all times. There's all this stuff that seems to go with children. So having panniers with you is brilliant. It means that I keep a lock in my panniers. I keep my waterproofs in the panniers at all times. I say waterproofs are essential. Even if you head out in Scotland thinking it's fine, it's not going to rain, that doesn't mean that an hour later it isn't raining. So my waterproofs live in the panniers. I keep things like one of the clips you put around your trousers if you've got baggy trousers, just in case, in my bags. I keep snacks in my bags. Panniers are a brilliant thing. That, I don't know if you can see in the picture as well, that's actually with the ice tyres on. So you can see they've got teeny little studs in them, which are amazing. You would barely notice them unless, so if you ride them without ice, it just sounds like you're riding over gravel. Another consideration, which I never thought about until my daughter started school, if you are riding at school with girls, skirts and dresses and things that girls wear to school are not quite as convenient as trousers if they want that. If it works for you, see if you can make it work for other people. This is, we got funding off Sustrans to get more bike storage in. We've now taken up bike storage just about all over the playground, and it's filling up because it's there. It is starting to be used. So there is funding out there. Talk to other people about riding at school as well. It's amazing how many people, once you start riding to school, will talk to you about it and ask your advice on it, and you will encourage other people just by seeing you. We're very lucky. Our school are very keen on cycling to school. This is Miss Gillis, she's one of the deputies, and she's a keen cyclist herself. This is her bike that she rides into school. So I help out, and we've run various events to celebrate the Getting the Bike Racks. We had a Bling Your Bike Day, which is why she doesn't normally ride with tinsel and fairy lights on it, but we had competitions with Bling Your Bike. Local bike shops gave us loads of presents and things to hand out to people and prizes. Following year, we did Bling Your Helmet. That was 2 years ago now, and there are still children with bling all over their helmets because they absolutely love their blingy helmets. It was brilliant. I also run a bike bus now. I put a link on the bottom. I write a blog called Mummy's Gonna Cycle. And I was persuaded, slightly reluctantly, to start a bike bus, which has actually been a really, really good thing, and I really enjoy it. So once a month, although we're not running just now, I ride my normal route to school, but it's open to anybody to come and join us. We have a couple of ride leaders that come along with us. And numbers, really, really nice today. And that is my little girl on the tandem, and this is just to make the point that kids love riding bikes. If you think back, if you rode a bike as a child, riding a bike is wonderful fun and kids love it. And if we can foster that enthusiasm and keep it going and keep them riding as adults, keep them remembering how much fun it was, that's a brilliant thing. And riding their bike every day, getting to school and back, is a great way to do that. So just finally, mummysgonnacycle.com, that's my blog. It's just me whispering on about whatever I think about. If anyone is thinking about cycling with kids and wants any more information, there's a Facebook page called Family Cycling UK. It's one of the friendliest Facebook pages I've ever been on. And whatever you're thinking of doing, trying to get children on bikes, there will be someone on there who's done it and will be able to advise on it. You're also very lucky in Fife and having the Fife Cycle Park in Lochgelly. Fantastic resource, again, for getting kids. I believe they have been running kids lessons and things up there as well, so it's well worth looking into. I don't know how much they're operating just now. I know they are open again. They have bikes they can hire out and all sorts of stuff, so it's well worth looking at the Fife Cycle Park. And that's me. Okay.
That's fantastic, Diana. Thank you very much. It's just interesting. It seems that your school are really supportive of it, but how supportive of cycling do you think schools and head teachers generally are?
I think it depends. I think if you have a teacher or a head teacher within your school who cycles, then they're super supportive. Others less so, and it depends where you are. To some degree, a lot of schools won't take it on as anything to do with them because it's getting to school, and you pile more and more things on school when they're already quite busy. It's quite difficult. If you turn up at your school and say, look, I want to cycle to school and I want to encourage other people and I want to work with you and do that, chances are they'll say, brilliant, on you go. They just don't have the time to do it themselves. I think at the moment it's not ideal. A lot of schools are saying, don't bring your bikes, we're closing the bike racks, things like that. So but it'll come back when all this has died down. And I think if you offer to do something, schools are generally, they'll jump at it.
Yeah, that sounds quite similar to like a lot of other things, that teachers are very busy.
Yeah.
They get bombarded with these requests. That sounds very familiar to me.
Yeah. Before I started doing a lot of cycling stuff, I was a primary school teacher, and so I can verify how very, very busy primary school teachers already are. There's no more space to do more stuff. If anyone wants to turn up and say, I'd like to help with this, then they will jump at it.
Okay, thank you. Oh, yeah, Carolyn, yeah, just unmute yourself, Carolyn, and on you go.
Yeah, just a little bit about schools. If your school has got a travel plan, and if your school has got issues with cars in the morning, where a lot of schools do for drop-offs, they will welcome you coming in to help with their travel plan, either with walk to school, routes, or like cycle to school routes, or scoot to school routes. So it's worth even talking. Most councils have like somebody who is working with schools to try and encourage cycling and walking to school or scooting to school. So it's worth talking to in your council to see who your bike to school is, council officer is, and also just talking to your school to see if they've got a travel plan and if you can sort of help out on that travel plan, because sometimes they have one of the deputy head teachers or one of the teachers sort of working with the school to try and encourage more walking and cycling. It's like you say, that a lot of schools are so busy trying to cope, but a lot of schools do have travel plans, and you can really fit into that, and they can find out, what parents are doing, walking to school or scooting to school or whatever.
It's one of the things that I've been doing with the school. So I ended up joining the parent council. We have a little group called the School Travel Action Group, and one of the biggest bits of work we've been doing is school travel plan. So we have written a monster of a school travel plan, and that's been pretty much me and one of the other parents that's done it. And some right now, when there's funding for all the spaces for people and all the COVID awareness, and there's a big focus on that, because we have a school travel plan that we've written, the council are listening to that. So they've taken it on board, and we've got a huge list of suggestions. We've got all the research work done behind it. So we're actually getting an awful lot more than some of the schools around us because we have a school travel plan. And again, there was a teacher within the school that was working towards that, but it's just one more thing that she was doing as well. So when we turned up and said we'd like to help with it, she was pretty much, yeah, on you go. And she's been incredibly supportive and incredibly keen for us to do it, and her to kind of go, yeah, and put the school point of view in. And it's worked really well. She's backed us up. She has been doing a campaign with one of the groups within the school. So she's got, the kids have designed parking tickets, and end of last year, the kids were going out once a week if they could manage it with staffing, and they would go out and hand parking tickets out to people parking on the yellow lines outside the school. And it's a lot more powerful a thing when a child is telling you, please don't park there, than when an adult is telling you, because people don't get confrontation all the same, they move on. So it's been really, really positive doing that.
Yeah, it's really good to have that link with parents working with the teachers in the school who are trying to put the travel plan together, and linked with your cycle officer in the council. If you can get that link together, you're going to be able to have the support and the funding, because the council can bring in some funding, but the school can bring in other funding, and the parents as a community group can bring in other funding, which means then that Sustrans can get involved, and a whole lot of the other cycle funding bodies can all come together, because you've got 3 different areas of funding that you can pull on. So it's a really good idea, if people can sort of join up together and work together on that, and sort of share that responsibility and that load and that workload, because it will have a much bigger effect for funding opportunities. Yeah,
Absolutely, I'd agree completely. From what we've done, we've been working with one of the councils as well, who's also a cyclist.
Yeah.
I see that Tommy has been in the chat box asking some questions about safety and safety equipment. So obviously he's from the States, so the rules are different out there. And he's asking whether cyclists are required to have lights, and also wondered if people regularly used mirrors, either on their bikes or on helmets. Maybe you've got some thoughts on safety, especially if people are watching this who are just starting out on cycling.
I think
Lights are always good.
as a commuter, lights are really important, and the more the better, basically. There is a debate that you shouldn't have a flashing light because there are some people who have, you know, can get affected from that from a health point of view. But flashing lights make people, especially if you're on the road, make drivers aware of you. If you're traveling in the dark and you see a flashing light, you know that's more than likely that's going to be a cyclist. And as a commuter, you can put flashing lights on your back, on your bag, on the back of your bike, on the back of your head. And then you can have lights on the front of your head and as well as on your bike, the front of your bike. So I think also wearing fluorescent and wearing as much of that kind of silver reflective stuff on you, because it's unbelievable if you're in the dark, people don't see you. So the more lights you have, the more reflective stuff that you've got on you. Absolutely go to town, you know, be as sparkly and as shiny and as seen as possible, because it will save your life. That's all I can say on that one. And again, you know, even on the cycle path, people are in a little world of their own. So if they see a flashing light, and these lights are very strong now, they can see you coming. They'll, in the dark, they'll see that flashing light. They'll have that sense that something's coming. And as George says, ring your bell so that they know that you're behind them and they can get out of the way. Because there's nothing worse than if you're expecting somebody to go one way and they jump the other way. You know, then you could end up in a hedgerow.
I believe the rear flashing red light, a bicycle is the only, certainly in Britain, bicycle is the only vehicle that has the rear flashing red light. So it means that if you see a rear flashing light ahead, it must be a cyclist. And it's always useful to have if you're cycling wherever there's traffic. And certainly nowadays with battery power, I mean, when I first started cycling, bicycles lamps were huge and the batteries really didn't last more than half an hour or more. Now I can go a whole winter almost without having to recharge my lights, but it's always useful. It's certainly a rear light so that people can see you when you're approaching from behind if you're on the road, far more than the front. However, if it's dark, and somebody, I think it was Pixie, who said if you're cycling in the dark, then a really good front light is absolutely essential and a legal requirement. As for covering yourself in reflective lights, there are lots of arguments about whether a cyclist should cover themselves in body armour and complete day glow coverings just to go out on their bike. It doesn't necessarily seem like a nice thing that we should have to do. Why are we having to do this? I saw a really interesting article from the 1930s that was arguing about whether cyclists should have to use a rear light or not, because it wasn't a legal requirement then. It said if cyclists have to use a rear light, it will mean that motorists will become lazy and not look out for cyclists. And it's the same sort of argument as the more body armour and the more reflection you have, it makes motorists more lazy and looking out for you. So on a long cycle ride, the last thing you want to do is be uncomfortable, however you do want to be seen. Although the arguments within commuting, when you're in amongst heavy traffic all the time, then the arguments are much stronger for being as visible as possible.
I guess, Diana, the kids must love putting on all the flashing lights and safety stuff and all that.
They do, but yeah, if you've got kids, you have to watch because they put the lights on when it's not dark, and before you know it, the battery's dead when you actually need them. I've been caught out by one device that keeps hair paddles now. They do like press buttons. I would say, yeah, lights are really essential.
use them less at this time of year, but that said, I think I don't need them. And in the last couple of days, I've had the lights on because it's just been so gloomy and dark.
I mean, the mist.
Similar to what George said, I'm not a huge fan of fluorescent jackets when it comes to normal day-to-day cycling. I think that it changes completely once it's dark. If it's dark, then yeah, wear everything fluorescent. I've got one of these, like you were saying, Carolyn, the silver jackets that reflect. They're brilliant. I would never wear it in this weather because I don't think necessarily. I don't think you should like a Christmas tree because it's dark and you want to be seen. You don't see cars driving around painted fluorescent in broad daylight, so really you shouldn't be having to wear fluorescent jackets, but you need to be seen more than
look at countries like Denmark and Netherlands with high percentage of cyclists. They cycle around in normal clothes, suits and jackets. They don't even wear helmets. It's just they just get on their bike and it's just what they do. They don't spend 20 minutes gearing themselves up and arming themselves against the traffic. And I need to teach people that cycling is normal and it's not something that we need to arm ourselves against. We need to be educating people. Having said that, if I was cycling through the centre of Edinburgh regularly, or London, or any large city, I would certainly be wanting to be visible as much as I could possibly be, because I don't trust motorists. I am a motorist. I don't trust me.
I think once the infrastructure is in place,
yes.
Once we have as good an infrastructure as Copenhagen or Holland or many of the Scandinavian countries, where you have more cyclists than cars in the cities, then you'll have this infrastructure that would enable you to take off the armour, because you're not being reduced to their little lanes and you have much more space to be able to do. And some of the designs that Sustrans are insisting that we work on in this country are to have 4 to 5 meters where you have segregated lanes. So you're taking the car away from the cyclist.
Yeah.
It will mean that more of that, the more that we have of these very wide lanes that we can share with pedestrians, and there's enough room for them too, means that you won't necessarily, as you say, George, have to put your armour on to keep safe.
I mean, it's quite interesting. I mean, there is a strong case of countries do, where the heaviest road user is the one who is presumed to be liable. So if a lorry knocks into a car, it's the lorry driver is presumed to be liable, just as a car hitting a cyclist, it's the car who's presumed to be liable. That law doesn't exist in Britain, and there's a strong body trying to campaign to have it. But it's just like we are sharing spaces with pedestrians. Cyclists are sharing spaces with pedestrians. We don't go out there and say, okay, pedestrians, you're sharing space with cyclists. You really need to wear visible day glow tops, and you need to wear helmets in case a cyclist knocks you over. But it's the same argument. It's the same argument. Whether you're going out onto and sharing a space with a car. Why should the cyclist be the one who has to do everything? If you're sharing with a pedestrian, surely the pedestrian should go have. But no, it's the cyclist all the time who's been the one who's been told what it is they have to do. So we just need to try and be sensible about when do we need body armour and when we don't need body armour, and get people to accept that there is a certain bit of responsibility on certain road users over those with whom they share that space.
Just noticed that there is a question that kind of links to that. It's come in actually from Christina. Is there any cycling education for new or young drivers out there? So it's not always the cyclists that need the education, that maybe the drivers need some too?
Well, I do know that in certainly a lot of bus companies now and heavy lorries, they do take them out and to try and explain what it would be like to even do the close pass thing, where they deliberately make them stand and have a lorry drive past them so they know what it feels like to be in a close pass. And I think but a lot of bus drivers are now there is education for them to understand how to cope with cyclists and what it feels like to be a cyclist when lorries are passing them. But I don't know that's not a law. That's just some companies who have decided that they want to dealing with cyclists. So that's certainly all I know about it. I don't know if anybody else knows more.
I think it's something to bear in mind with drivers as well, and conflict with drivers on the roads, that which ties in with the education thing, is generally when a driver drives past you too close or doesn't treat you how you would like to be treated when you're on a bike, in the majority of cases, it's not badness on their behalf, it's not knowing. If you don't ride a bike yourself, knowing how that feels to be close past is actually really quite hard to understand.
Yeah.
I have a friend whose son is in my son's year at school, who I used to see her most mornings on the school run, and she'd be going, "Hi!" as she went past with about an inch to spare. And it wasn't her thinking, "I will not respect that cyclist." It was just not understanding what that felt like. And I think as cyclists, sometimes it's easy to get very angry at that because we feel threatened by it. And that doesn't help. That actually speaking to that other mum calmly and saying, "Do you know, that's a bit close. Do you mind going a bit wider?" And she's like, "Oh, I'm so sorry, I had no idea." And I think having those calm conversations can sometimes be quite difficult.
And I think that's why I think Cycling UK are leading the Close Pass campaign, and it's quite successful in a lot of places. And they've got mats that are drawn and measured out and to show motorists exactly what the distance is they need to give to pass the cyclist. And as these things are more and more successful, more and more people are made aware of, then the better it is for the rest of us.
That's one of the things that we've written into our school travel plan, which is to try and get the police to come in with their close pass mat and just be there at school drop-off time. Not right now because it's all a bit strict, but just be there in the playground with the mat and just chat to mums and chat to drivers about why they have that, why it's important, and just make people aware of that, because it is most of the time it's ignorance rather than malicious.
Yeah.
Can I just, there's a question I've just seen on the chat as well about the bike bus from Pixie. We're not running it at the moment. So I lead rides for Breeze as well, and we have just had permission this week to now go beyond the 5 households limit and to take out bigger rides. So that would get me thinking maybe we could do the bike bus. To be honest, at the moment, I'm going to leave it on hold because I think the school are working so hard to put all these things in place and to keep classes in their own little bubbles and not mix up the classes, that I don't really want to mess with that. Even though a bike bus probably wouldn't, I think the schools are working so hard that we need to back the schools up in making sure kids can be distanced, that we minimise the risks of the schools having to shut again. So for the time being, although I'd like to run the bike bus, I'm going to reassess it each month, but it won't be in September. We'll see where things stand in October as to whether we get it going again. So it will come back, but it might be a little while just now.
Okay, has anybody got any more questions they would like to put to our panel? Then you can just type them in the box, or if you want to speak them out loud, then just type your name into the box and I'll come to you. And yeah, just to answer that question that that Christine wrote in the box, yes, this will be shared on YouTube and on our Facebook page, so it'll be available to watch again because there's been loads of good stuff. Carolyn, were you waving at us there?
No, sorry, I was just moving the hair out of my eye.
Okay, so maybe then we can kind of wrap up with the question then of what would be your one piece of advice for somebody who isn't a cyclist now, or maybe was in the past and wants to get back into cycling. How can they achieve that confidently? And maybe, if possible, for our true Kirkcaldy folk, if you can make it a bit Kirkcaldy specific, that would be grand.
Well, the obvious answer is to come along to one of Greener Kirkcaldy's social bike rides.
Excellent, thank you, George.
Because I can't think of anything else that could be better. I mean, and it's looking for your local. There are a lot of local clubs and things as well. If you're not lucky enough to be in the Kirkcaldy area, there are cycling clubs and places like the Loch Gelly Centre where you can go along and join in. But certainly the small social rides the Greener Kirkcaldy do are ideal because they're short, they're easy, and lovely people come along, and they're good fun.
One of the things we had at work when I worked in London were bike buddies. So that if anybody wanted, and we set it up at work. So if anybody wanted to actually cycle to work, we could have a bike buddy go with them, work out the route, and then cycle it with them, so that it could get into work and feel safe about doing those routes. And I think that's a really good thing if anybody you know, wants to be able to commute to work. Well, a lot of people will be working from home now, still because of COVID, but it's finding somebody. Like when I moved to Edinburgh, one of the things that my friend did for me, which I will forever thank her, was introduce me to the cycle routes of Edinburgh. You know, right, very early on, said, if you want to go to Stockbridge, this is how you get there, and here's the greenest and the safest way to get there. And that is like finding out who else is cycling and asking them, and not being scared to ask people, you know, how do I get from A to B? What's the best way to do it? What's the safest way? Can you come with me? And going to your work and say, is there anybody else cycling to work? You know, and just putting it out there. Because most workplaces will have a travel plan as well, or should have a travel plan. And you should be able to sort of contact people about how they get to work and maybe share a cycle route. There's probably somebody, if you're wanting to do it, there's probably somebody else wanting to do it, you know. And as you said, you know, like Diane, you were saying, just talk to people, the parents, talk to people in the canteen, or put notice boards up, or whatever it is you want to do, and see if you can find some buddies that do it with you. I think that's a really, really good way to get started.
Absolutely echo exactly what George and Carolyn are saying. Find someone who rides a bike and ask them to ride with you, whether that be through something like Greener Kirkcaldy or through putting something up at work. So I'm involved with Breeze Rides, which is a women's specific thing. It's a British cycling, Scottish cycling programme. So we have volunteers. There are, I believe, 1 or 2 up in Fife. I'm not sure how active they are right now. And we put on free lead rides for women. I've had folk that have come along the rides that pushed their bikes to start point because they were too scared to ride on the roads, but now ride everywhere. I have one lady that she wasn't sure about coming. I look really silly in my helmet. I'm really wobbly. And she set out the other day and did 30 miles on her bike, really big, heavy steel bike with panniers on it, and had a whale of a time. She rides with her kids. She rides everywhere. It's totally transformed her life. And it's just being able to cycle alongside somebody else who feels more confident will make the power of difference. They'll show you the different cycle routes, like you said, Carolyn. Edinburgh has great cycle routes when you find them. I don't know if Kirkcaldy's the same in that they are really good, but you've got to find them first.
Well,
right,
there's a map on that website that I put up on my, that's a map of all the cycle routes in Fife.
Brilliant.
And you can just go online and you can find it. It's on the Fife Council website. So
I popped the link up in the text box there for people to copy. And also to say, Greener Kirkcaldy does have a cycle map as well that you can get from our website.
Do you think it would be useful if we've got, because there's things like Heels on Wheels, and there's a whole lot of different cycle groups and cycle websites. Do you think if we sent you some, Craig, that you could maybe then share them? Would that be something that might be useful?
Yeah, happy to get any information, and we can maybe think about how we can share that. Absolutely. If you want to ping me an email after this, that'd be grand. Okay, folks, so we are approaching 8:30 now, so I think what we'll do is we'll finish up there. I'm just going to do a little plug for the cycling festival for everybody. So we're right in the middle of it, and there's still other events going on. So the Bit of Living Through Pedaling event is on tomorrow. There's still spaces available on that. Again, it's a Zoom event, and we'll have some speakers talking about how cycling has helped them overcome difficulties in their lives. There are a number of lead rides that George has done a great job of plugging there, the social rides. So small groups going out for lead cycles around Kirkcaldy. So if you want to get out on your bike, then look them up. And we even have some cycling games for kids at the weekend. So if you've got kids aged P4 to P7, then you can head over to our website. The festival link is halfway down our homepage. If you click through that, you'll get into the sign up for all of our events. And also, I think it was touched on as well in, was it Carolyn's talk there, that we have recently launched our Longtoon Cycles, which is our brand new community bike shop. It was slightly held up by all this COVID stuff. So at the moment, it is operating out of our building on East Fergus Place, but it will be moving to new premises at some point soon. So keep an eye on social media. But the plan is that we're going to have a cycling shop in the town centre, which will be offering repair services, sales of refurbished bikes, bike recycling, and also it will be housing our bike borrowing scheme. So you can borrow for free for a month, push bikes, e-bikes. We even have one of those lovely cargo bikes, which we've just got, which is great, and it's an e-bike as well. So if you want to get involved in cycling, then the Longtoon Cycles is something to like on our webpage, like on the Facebook, and hopefully over the next few weeks we might have some exciting announcements about it too. So basically we've now got no excuse if you live in Kirkcaldy not to be cycling. Okay, so there's lots going on, and a big thank you to our speakers. That was really good. So much great information there. People from America joining in as well, which is lovely. And I'm sure if people watch this, then that will get more people out on their bikes. So thank you very much to Dianna, George, and Carolyn. That was really good. Thank you very much. And I hope to see you all again. Thank you for coming.